How do you catch a cloud and pin it down?
How do you find a word that means Maria?
A flibbity-gibbet,
A will-o'-the-wisp,
a clown. Many a thing you know you'd like to tell her. Many a thing she ought to understand. But how do you make her stay and listen to all you say? How do you keep a wave upon the sand?
Oh, how do you solve a problem like Maria?
How do you hold a moonbeam in your hand?
All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here, and welcome to our inaugural technology conference. So, the topic of my talk, as you can see, is how do you solve a problem like Maria? And I don't know if everybody knows who Maria is, but if you haven't seen this movie, this is a, I think 1950s, maybe 1960s movie. It's a musical. It's probably one of the best ever musicals ever made. If you haven't seen it, torrent it, stream it, whatever you want to do, watch it. It's really good. I didn't say that, did I? No, I mean, go and buy a DVD and watch it. Sorry. I don't think it's on Netflix, I doubt it. But anyway, watch it. It's really interesting, right? So what's the deal with Maria? So you heard, if you listen to the lyrics, in this story, Maria is this kind of out-of-control nun who's in a convent, and they're trying to get her to kind of play along and conform. And the conversation is about how do you solve a problem like that, right? So the question is really from a problem-solving perspective, right? I'm not a musical person. I don't know anything about music. I can't sing if you shoot me even, etc. But from a problem-solving perspective, how do you solve a problem like Maria? That's what I want to talk about, right? So, of course, Maria is a bit complicated. If these are the words that were sung in that section, right? She's a bit of a complicated person. There's a bunch of things, and so you need to solve a problem like that now, right? This is not our typical problem, right? We have problems like how do I make this scale, or how do I secure it, or how do you make it bigger or smaller or faster or cheaper, whatever, right? Maria is a little bit more non-orthogonal than that. So my goal for this talk, is kind of ambitious, is to convince you that there is a way to solve any problem like this in a structured way, and that it can be done in a way that you can prove that prove is a bit strong. You can really feel like you got a damn good solution for the problem, right? There are some problems not covered. Fight you're having with your girlfriend is not covered. That doesn't fall in the rational realm. That's in a higher order conversation. If you're married, it's even a higher order than that. So we're not talking about those things, right? Our political conversations, these are religious conversations, not those things. Those are problems that are unsolvable with any kind of known computational technology. I'm talking about things that are rational and that have a solution that can be solved and actually be able to get through that. And of course, the other part is I want you to believe that, this is not complete BS. It's actually possible. And then the goal is hopefully that you will actually practice that and be able to solve any problem that we run into as we move along. So in order to solve Maria, we need a few things, right? This is not Maria-style stuff, but we need this stuff. And everybody here is supposed to be technical. Well, 99% of the people here are technical people. There are some people from other parts of the company as well, which is great. And these are all things that everybody knows, right? I studied this, now I'm kind of old, so I studied 40 years ago. So I think most of you guys are not born 40 years ago. So this stuff has been around for a long time. These are the foundations of basically linear algebra, right? So I'm gonna spend 1 second each just so give you a quick refresher, but it's not enough to make any sense, and the people who know the mathematics of it will probably laugh at the way I explain it, but that's okay. This is so Frank, don't look at it, and Srinath and all the other technically ultra uber geeky guys, look the other way, right? All right, so vector space. What's a vector space? It's a set of vectors that defines a space which is of a certain size, and it's a way of navigating within that space using coordinates of the vector space, right? A vector defines a point in that n-dimensional space. What's a basis? A basis is a set of vectors that lets you combine them and get to any point in the space, right? It's a linearly independent set of vectors that can be combined to get to any point in the space. And again, very high level concept, right? Dimension is how many vectors it takes to get a basis. How many do you need in order to be able to get to any point in the space? Right? And that depends on that's the dimensionality of the space. So n-dimensional space means you need n vectors. Right? 2D is the easiest one to imagine. Right? If you have two-dimensional space, a plane like this, if you have 2 coordinates, you can get to any point, right? And there are multiple coordinate systems, etc. Orthogonality is probably the most important point that I want to make. And this is a word that I use regularly, and even Padmika, who's our CFO, quotes it back to me. So I have brainwashed her for almost 20 years now, 17, 18 years, I think. And she tells me when I go off on a track, she's like, that's orthogonal, right? That's a very important point. So orthogonal basically, to me, is the magic that you need to learn in order to solve anything. Orthogonal fundamentally means independent. And the concept applies in many different areas. I went to the Wikipedia page. By the way, all these quoted text images and so forth are from Wikipedia. I forgot to put a reference, but Wikipedia is kind of open source, so they won't sue me. A orthogonal concept comes in pretty much every field. And it's fundamentally about some kind of being at perpendicular to each other. Perpendicular only applies in a certain kind of space, but it's much more general than that. So the last one is kind of important. In computer programming, orthogonality means being able to change one thing with another. Actually, what I want to point was the programming language one. A well-designed language has orthogonal features. That means if I want to do something, there's one really good way to do it in the language constructs. And they don't overlap all over the place, right? C++ was the worst of all because you had do while do, for loop, all these different ways of iterating, right? If you want a really well-designed orthogonal language, take a look at Ballerina. Small plug there, completely unbiased. All right, so, and then we have orthonormality. Orthonormal means basically orthogonal and of unit length, right? It doesn't really matter, it's too abstract for practical use. And then there's this guy, these two guys, and there was other people. The Gram-Schmidt process is a process for taking a set of linearly independent vectors and make it into an orthogonal basis for the vector space. So the advantage of being orthogonal is you have an optimal kind of way of navigating that vector space. Linearly independent vectors, you may have more than what you need, and this is how you kind of clean up the basis so you get a really good basis. All right? Okay, so what the hell does this have to do with Maria? So the way I think about problems and the way I solve any problem, again, rational problems, is that you think of it as the problem space as an n-dimensional vector space. And then basically to solve the problem means first finding a good basis so you can navigate everywhere, and then you know how to go from any place, wherever you are in the problem space, to another place, because it's simply a matter of navigating along those dimensions. Right? And once you get that done, you have a way to, you have a guarantee, a mathematical guarantee that you've covered every point in the space. So a customer can't come and ask you for a feature if you covered that dimension completely, because you thought about every possible scenario, right? Not on a if this scenario do this, if this scenario do this, if this scenario do this basis, because you'll never get to the end of that, right? Because then you have n to the mi complicated formula of things that you need to implement with that model. But if you do it orthogonally, you say, I'm going to go down this dimension, these 5 points, this dimension, these 5 points, this dimension, these 17 points, other dimension, whatever n dimensions, n points, now I can cover everything, right? That's the power of being orthogonal. So in order to solve a problem, then you need to discover a basis. Ideally, it's an orthogonal basis, and even better yet, if it's orthonormal, it doesn't really make much difference in this space, right? But there's one problem in solving problems, which is that the problem is at the beginning, when you're working with an abstract problem like Maria, you don't know how many dimensions you need to solve the problem, right? So you're trying to find a basis for an n-dimensional space where n is unknown. So that's the first problem, right? That's kind of hard because I don't know how many bases. How do I know I've solved the problem? Because I don't know. And that's again coming back to product design. That's why we often, when people start using a product, they come back and say, well, you didn't think about this stuff, or I need this stuff. And that could be in a completely another direction we haven't thought about yet, right? That's perfectly fine. That can happen because it's hard. We don't know all the possible dimensions. If it's a well-known problem, you know what the dimensions are, how many dimensions there are, and you can solve them. The second point is also important. Given an n-dimensional space, there are many bases. There's not one basis, right? That is why there are many ways to solve a problem. What that says is there are many ways to skin a cat, basically. You have this way that I found a basis for it, another basis, different companies, different groups of people, different ways of thinking will create different bases for the same space. And that's completely okay mathematically. Practically, that may be full of it, because when a human being starts using it, one of those bases becomes a really good one. Take internet search as an example, right? Google invented PageRank, created this fantastic search engine, and then, so before Google, if you guys are old enough, you might remember Yahoo. Yahoo's search engine was actually originally human beings sorting stuff. Right? They had people going to every website and say, that looks like a page about finance and about this kind of thing, and let me put it here. And when you wanted to find something, you go and look through the catalog. Right? Google's introduces concept of search, not sort, for large amounts of information. You don't sort information, you just search through it. And they invented this PageRank algorithm and so on. And they were dramatically better. But then so did others. They came up with their own way of doing similar things, Bing, Microsoft, and so many others. But right now, 95% or 99% of search is Google. Right? So because they got a whole bunch of other things that they did right to make that work. So the point is, there are many ways of solving a problem, but there is a concept of a solution that is best adopted by a market as well. Right? So same thing applies for our products. Right? When you make a product, the product might be completely able to solve any problem. Right? And we had the world's best governance product. Right? Remember? Governance registry. So you guys have to be old enough to remember governance registry. This is our third product. This is 2007 maybe or 8 that we shipped it. Governance registry could govern anything. Only problem was it's the world's best governance registry that didn't govern anything out of the box. So you have to set up everything to govern anything. Right? So the problem is nobody can figure out how to govern a damn thing, let alone anything. So it was a great product, but didn't go anywhere, and we still have some poor customer who's paying for it, but they love it. So, all right. So okay. So let's keep going. So the way to solve problems is this. To me, this is a very simple formula. You just apply this formula, and any problem can be solved. I'm done. So, all right. So how do you solve a problem? Any problem. So basically, first step is decompose the problem into orthogonal dimensions. Orthogonal means independent dimensions. So you can find you have to find a way to think about the problem, saying I got to solve this part of it, I got to solve that part of it, I got to solve this aspect of it, and so on. Right? These are the orthogonal dimensions. Then for each dimension, you have to apply first principles thinking. Now, first principles thinking, of course, is made widely popular with Elon Musk talking about thinking from first principles all the time. And fundamentally, it's about saying question all assumptions. That is why we ask why all the time. Right? Why should be asked to say, why do I need this and why do I not need this? Both sides. Right? So why is a very powerful question. If you have kids, if you have young kids, it's a damn annoying question, right? Every bloody thing is like you give an answer, it's like why? So then you have to go a step back further. Why is the answer to that question that? Right? Eventually you get to questions which are like, well, that's the way it is. So stop. Right? Because you just can't answer it, right? You don't know enough, and most of it is axioms that we were told somewhere upstream, we kind of accept it. And you hit the axiom, you can't explain the axiom, right? That's what axioms are, things that you take for granted as fact in some form. So partition the problem into orthogonal dimensions, then crack each space, that's it. And if you got it, you're done. If you haven't got it, you got to revisit the problem and say, okay, what did I not get right? What dimensions did I miss? How badly non-orthogonal are my dimensions? Can I orthogonalize them? And then go and do it again. Right? So, and if you keep doing this, you converge to the best possible answer. So that's it. You can solve Maria with this. Right? Now, so Maria is a bit of a complication. Maria is too much of a hot mess to solve. I think I'm politically correct. I love to say hot mess. I don't care. We are past the DEI era now, so I love to say things now. So this is too abstract a problem to solve. So let's take something which is slightly more concrete and that we can actually work with to solve the problem. So I'm going to, this is a blog I was going to write. I started working on it, I have like 10 blogs that I started working on over the last period, which are still working on stage. But this one I started working on a couple, I think early this year, but I haven't finished it yet. So I thought I will use this talk to kind of articulate the blog a little bit. But the purpose of this talk is not to actually solve this problem and tell you how to engineer your success, because that was the purpose of the blog, but is to understand the methodology behind how you solve a problem like that, right? So it's a meta conversation, not the problem itself. So the problem is, how do I engineer my success, right? Because a lot of people, all of us who are here are successful in multiple ways, right? You wouldn't be in this room if you don't have a great education. You wouldn't be in this room if you don't have the capacity to do great things, right? Or we are screwed as a company, right? All of us in this company are amazing people, and all of us have other opportunities. You choose to be here. So everybody's been successful already. And success is not I'm not a believer in success being a goal, right? Success is an incremental position you can take along the way, and if you ever make it a goal, you'll never get there. So it's different advice. So the question is, when people ask, okay, how do I do something? How do I get somewhere? Is it possible to mathematically solve that problem? So let's think about that, basically. How do I define success and how do I crack it? How do I figure out how do I become successful, right? And what does it take to become successful? So first of all, I'm not going to define success in this conversation because that's impossible to define, first of all. And the goal is not to, again, the goal of this conversation is not to solve this problem, but rather understand a way of solving problems such as this, right? So the goal here is to come up with the algorithm for somebody to achieve success, all right? So let's get going. So the first step is supposed to be orthogonal decomposition. Take this problem of how do I hack success and decompose it, right? So then you can say, well, how do I decompose that question? So one way to decompose that question, it's not the only way, remember there are many bases for this problem. One way to decompose this problem, this question, is to look at people who have been successful and see what are the aspects or what are the characteristics that you can identify that are orthogonal, that are helping you understand how they got there, right? So let's do that. So first of all, to me, it's a little bit like multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication is what you know, something you know, something you have, something you are, right? So criteria for success in many ways are what you know. Again, you wouldn't be in this room if you don't know a bunch of stuff, right? This room is a very specialized room with highly educated people, highly competent people. You all know this stuff, otherwise we wouldn't be participating in this conversation. So what you know is very, very important for success. Second part is who you know. So every time we put an ad in the paper for any kind of job, especially in Sri Lanka, we get 500 plus paper or whatever medium, right? We get 500 plus responses. How do you sift through 500 plus responses and give everybody a honestly fair shake? Basically, it's impossible. Right? You cannot work through 500 responses and identify who are the 20 people that you want to talk to fairly and get the best possible opportunity for everybody. Right? So who you know plays a role in things like, do I get an interview at all? Right? And the third part is who you are. If you are born as a child of Bill Gates, I can't remember, I think he has 2 kids, success is kind of, depending on the way you define success. If you define success in terms of wealth, not a problem, right? If you define success in terms of being happy with what you do, I don't know whether any of them are happy with what they do or what they've done. I don't know anything about their kids, right? Maybe, hopefully they are both very successful. But who you are plays a big role. If you are born to a family in Gaza, your chance of success are far lower than if you're born to a family in Australia or the US or Sri Lanka even, right? And so those are things that, who you are, basically. So these are dimensions that when I think about the problem of, okay, how do I tell somebody, how do you engineer success? These are things that have affected the ability to become successful, right? So, and these are independent. For me, who you are is completely independent from what you know. Okay, so it's not completely independent, right? If you are in the middle of a war zone where you are being, killed regularly, you don't have the opportunity to learn stuff. So how the hell do you get to what you know? Because you don't have the opportunity, right? So these are not totally independent, right? And again, in real life, when you solve complicated problems, Mathematical independence is not possible. You get too much more sort of fungible form of independence. It's not absolutely 100% independent, but given certain conditions, you can claim these are independent. So let me go through each one now a little bit. So the next step is we take each one of these. If these are the dimensions that matter for somebody to be successful, you take each one of these and you break it down. You think through it from first principles, right? So what are the aspects of each one of these that helps you be successful or not successful? So let's take a look at one of them. Education. What you know. So what you know can be put in multiple forms. The most straightforward thing is education. That is why if you are a parent, you push your children to study. Right? My parents pushed me to study. It was not an option not to study. It was because they came from a background where studying is what got them everything they had. That's the one thing you knew, that you educate yourself, you have an opportunity for yourself. Right? That's the one thing. Education has been a huge part of defining success. And education can also be, and I skipped stages before bachelor's, that's not to suggest there aren't stages before bachelor. This is the standard education structure that exists in the world right now. Right? And there are debates about, do you need this structure at all? There's a massive debates going on about, do you need a 4-year university degree to be able to work in WSO2? Right? Do you need a master's? Do you need all this nonsense? And a PhD has a certain structure. Is that structure the structure that you need anymore? There are so many different things that people are questioning about what is education, what is the kind of education to have, is a K through 12 education system that we have needed, etc., etc., etc. But we know that education, if you have education, that biases you towards being successful than not having education. Right? The other part is skills. Skills and education are slightly different. Education are things that you learn primarily about how to learn about other things. Skills are specific capabilities you learn about how to do something. We wouldn't have this meeting here if somebody wasn't able to prepare this platform and this environment in a level where it feels completely platformless. I managed to throw in platformless. The point is, we didn't think about the platform, we don't think about all this stuff. There's a ton of stuff, and there's a bunch of guys back there in that dark corner making sure everything just works perfectly, that when I speak, it works, I can see the time, I can see the slides, you guys can see me, I can see you enough, etc., right? All these things that are kind of taken care of, that's a massive skilled group of people. And without those people, we can't be here, right? So that's the skill side of it. And third part is, of course, in terms of what you know, is experience. A lot of jobs, a lot of things, a lot of say, well, you must have experience. Except for being a politician, you need to have experience. Any other job, you need to have experience on something or the other, right? And experience, and none of these are preconditions for the other. There are plenty of people who never went to university. My father didn't go to university. He actually, after O-level, he stopped school and did City and Guilds exams, which is a skills training program, because they didn't have money to go to school. And then went to the army and experience, and then they taught different stuff, right? So there are many ways of navigating what you know concept. And they're not all necessary, or they are not all built one on top of the other. You don't get experience after you get education, right? A lot of people get experience before. And more, again, this is another big debate going on, saying, is the model of going to university for 4 years or 3 years and then going and working the right model? US had this thing called co-op programs, which were like cooperative study. I can't remember the detail of it, but basically you go to school for 1 semester, work for 1 semester, go back to school, and kind of back and forth kind of model. Different countries have different systems. We have internship programs here in all the universities in Sri Lanka, for the most part, where you for some spend some time at work. And so there are many ways of getting experience. So the point is, what you know is an important aspect of being able to become successful, right? So let me go to another dimension, which is who you know. And in fact, a lot of people will say, there's a line called, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Right? Imagine, you said WSO2 analogy. If 700 people apply for a job, how do you stand out? So yes, if you have, so we can apply filters. We've tried using AI, but AI has its own set of problems. We've kind of given up on all of them because none of them works. So my latest push is saying we should have some kind of a competitive opportunity for people to actually do something to get themselves ahead of the line, ignoring all other things like which university you went to, what your GPA was, all this stuff that are the easy checkboxes to cut people off, right? Which eliminates a lot of people in a very unfair way. So who you know matters because these help establish things, networking basically. So obviously when you are born into a family, you know your family, most people have some friends. If you work, you have some co-workers and so on. And then you have people, business leaders that you meet, professionals, politicians. All these things have an impact on your ability to be successful, right? The fastest path to success, last bullet, right? Get to know a politician, and I can't use the French words I would have used to how to take the next step with that, but the point is there are many things that we underestimate the value of this aspect of the impact of this aspect on success. But again, the goal of my talk here is not to convince you on how to achieve success, because that's my blog. I will write one of these decades. This is more about the methodology, right? So the point is there are different aspects of that dimension, and some of these are things that you have to dig in further to, right? But it gives you enough of an idea, say, okay, if I think structurally about who you know, how do I crack the problem of I don't know anybody? A lot of people don't have access, right? You are in a small village in Sri Lanka, you did really well in school, you went to university, you don't speak English very well, you don't have access. So how do you crack that problem? In a structured way, not in a lucky way, because luck also plays a role. You right place, right time, you sit next to somebody, and they have a conversation with you, and that can open a door. But so you need to think about, okay, how do you, in a structured way, crack this problem? And how do you facilitate people to be able to go through this path? Third one was, of course, who you are. So again, this one, some of these are hackable, some of them are not hackable. That is, your birthright is not hackable. Again, if you're born into a war zone or a disaster, or whatever not even disaster, but destruction zone like Gaza, your birthright is far lower than if you're born into a economically wealthy, powerful environment, right? Even if you are in a poor family situation. So family, again, you don't have full control over who you're born into. Actually, sorry, you don't have any control over who you're born into. Forget about full control, right? You don't get to choose your parents, you don't get to choose your country of birth, you don't get to choose your location of birth, you don't get to choose your religion. All this is like stuffed into you out of the box, right? When you come out of the box, these labels are attached immediately, and you're like, okay, I'm one of that, basically. But there's a bunch of other stuff you can actually work on, right? Personality, you can improve on improving personality. Now, it's also absolutely possible to be perfectly successful at having a shittiest personality in the world. You'll probably get into trouble for this, but what the hell? If you go to see a doctor in Sri Lanka, some of those doctors are really shitty personalities. They'll treat you like hell, but they'll keep you alive. They know their stuff, right? They won't tell you, oh, how are you doing today? None of this. They look at you, boom, prescription, and it works, right? Their pattern managing engine is better than any generative AI system out there yet. And, it's like FSD, full self-driving in Sri Lanka, good luck, right? That architecture probably won't work for here. Similarly for our medical, but they're really good. They may not have some of the aspects that matter. But if you want to engineer success, you need to learn what are the things that I can work on to get my dimensions of success solved. And so again, what I'm doing is I'm asking, okay, if we are saying who you are is important, let's break that down. What does who you are mean? Right? I'm not asking from a philosophical sense of who am I, right? Then it gets into a whole another conversation. It's not about authentication, who am I? There's a whole set of answers about how do you authenticate that somebody is somebody. But this is more about, in the context of success, who am I? How do I understand who I am, and then see which of these are done deal. Birthright is a done deal, family is a done deal. There's so many other things that are not a done deal, that I have control over, that I can hack, that I can engineer, that I can manipulate, I can operate, I can develop, right? That's the point. Okay, so now we're at the point of saying, okay, well, we've cracked the problem, we've broken it into 3 dimensions in this case. We have found some aspects of each of those dimensions. Now, if we've solved the problem, we're done. So how do you know whether you've solved the problem, first of all? So this is a long-term process. It's like asking, we released version, what did we release of iOS recently? 7 of Identity Server. Is it done? Is it solved the problem? Is it the best product it can be? Well, you don't know. It could be, but you don't know for months and years. It depends on market response. It depends on our ability to evolve. It depends on whether we've cracked everything to the right level so that when we are moving to the next step, we don't have to go back and restart again because, oh shit, we didn't think about that one. So we need to remove all this stuff and start again for that part, right? That's what success means in the case of product engineering. So you can't answer these questions immediately. But over time, you will see whether you've got that problem solved, right? So again, the important point is in the context of defining success or engineering success, in that problem context, life is a journey, it's not a destination. This is Steve Jobs' quote, right? You're not trying to get somewhere. You're getting along every day till you drop dead one day, right? This is the way it works. There's no like, oh, I got it, I'm done now, and then what, right? So it's just like asking why, you can ask a question, and then what after anything? And then you're like, you got to think about it, because unless you're done, as in your life doesn't continue anymore, there is a then what. So if you define success, I get here, I'm done, okay, and then what? Right? I don't know whether I'm going to spend a minute and tell a story. I'm sure most of you have heard it. It's one of these, obviously made up, but so this guy goes to some fancy university, gets an undergraduate degree, goes to Harvard, does an MBA, and before he has a fantastic offer at some Wall Street hedge fund. Before he goes there, he decides to take a holiday. So he goes to Mexico and sits on the beach, drinking, not Mai Tais, I think that's what you drink in Hawaii, I don't know, whatever. What are you drinking? Mojitos, sorry. He's sitting at the beach drinking mojitos. And then he sees this old guy in a boat going out fishing every day, going in the morning, going fishing, coming back, and then doing it again next day. So after 3 days, he's like, this is stupid, let me go and talk to him. So he goes and talks to him and says, why do you do this every day? Why not bring enough fish for 2 days, or get another person to help you so you can bring more fish? The guy says, well, and then what? He says, well, then you hire another person, you get another boat, and then what? Well, then you go and get a trawler, then what? You get a multi-day trawler, then you get many of these, blah, blah, and then what? Then you IPO the company in Wall Street, and then what? Then you retire, and then what? Then you go fishing. Right? So if you define success as I get somewhere, always ask yourself, and then what? Right? And you'll never get an answer to that question. There is no any place that you can get to as, okay, I'm done now. Except when you're like, knocked out, yeah. Then you're done, yeah. Well, we don't know, but I mean, we don't understand what happens at that point mathematically yet. So if you haven't got that done, then you continue. That is, you go on and go to the next step. So what is the next step? Next step is, look at the problem again. What did I miss? Do I have enough dimensions? Do I have too many dimensions? Are my dimensions orthogonal at all? If they were not orthogonal, I'm doing a shit ton of work to do stuff that shouldn't be difficult. I remember many such conversations in product engineering meetings, right? Things that are simple take way too long. Why? Because we haven't got the right underlying basis. If you got the right underlying basis, it is only going to take as long as it mathematically has to take. Right? If you got it right, these problems become simple. We have several talks along those lines. I think Srinath and we have a bunch of talks today to help you understand this even further. The point is, if you get some things right, things that are simple, things that are hard. Not the other way around. Things that are simple shouldn't be hard, things that are hard shouldn't be simple. That means you haven't got the foundation right. So go back and fix it. That's, apply Graham-Schmidt basically, saying, have I got the right basis? Have I got a basis that works? Is it a basis at all? Is it orthogonal? And sometimes you have to throw it out and do it again because you're on the wrong basis. If you're on the wrong basis, you can't get to the next one. So in Choreo, we've done this 3 times. Now we're doing Choreo V3, right? V1 had one basis, V2 had another basis, V3 has a completely different basis. WSO2 started off on Axis 2 and SOAP. That was our foundation for everything we did for a long time. Then we threw it out. It's not our foundation at all. Because that basis ran out of space, basically. We had to kind of abandon that foundation and go to another foundation. Right? That is what it means to evolve in technology companies. And you have to keep on doing that. Every successful tech company, Microsoft to me is one of the best ones in that regard because they have pivoted so much from where they were to where they are now. Versus IBM hasn't done that very well. Apple is still kind of fiddling around with own set of things, right? Microsoft has done that, and they've done that brilliantly well. where they have created new world by completely changing the basis they're operating in. And then you go back to the next step 2 and you're done. So now we have to ask, okay, have we got the right basis? But we didn't capture, and again, the problem here is not to solve the problem of how do you hack your success, right? But I intentionally left one out that I am going to write about, which is intangible stuff, so that I could point out that you don't necessarily have to get it right the first time. You might have missed an entire dimension that you didn't think about. So what does this intangible stuff mean in this case? Stuff like luck, opportunity, timing. Let me give you an example, Zoom, right? Everybody knows Zoom. What was Zoom before COVID? Maybe they're the ones who started the China virus. Not China virus. Because you remember the valuation of Zoom afterwards? They shot up, right? They took over the entire market. Zoom became a massively valuable company because timing, they were a great product. At the time, they were way better than Meet and Teams and all the other things that people are using. They were way better, but they were not like dominating the market. Suddenly, everybody had to go online. And Zoom has become a verb, like Google has become for search, right? Let's have a Zoom call. Let's have a Zoom. I'll send you a Zoom. What the hell is a Zoom, right? I'm not, in WSO2 we don't send Zooms, we send Google Meets, right? We don't say, I'll send you a meet. That's kind of weird. I'll send you a meeting invite. But Zoom became a verb. That's how successful they were. Timing. Of course, they didn't plan the timing. They didn't know that there was going to be a pandemic that's going to put everybody sit at home and work from home and you need video conferencing, right? They just got lucky. But remember, they got lucky, but they were awesome at the time they got lucky, right? So luck doesn't come to people who are lazy ass sitting on their butt. Luck comes to people who work really, really hard and position themselves to be lucky, right? Now I can go into a different concept of being lucky and how that works, but let me leave that alone because I'm going to get into more trouble. So, and the other one is opportunity that are intangible. A lot of people say, well, I never got a chance. My answer is most people are so lazy to take opportunities they get and run with it. Because taking an opportunity and doing something is work. Most people don't take the opportunities that are in front of them because it's some work. They want to do some extra stuff or go and, have a drink or watch a movie, right? Why am I forgetting the name of the movie we are talking about? Anyway, right? That's a volunteer. I can tell you, I gave a talk some years ago in Sri Lanka about taking the opportunity, and it was all about volunteering. Because everything I've done, every opportunity I've had has come because I went and volunteered for something else, right? That was my own time. Instead of playing or partying or whatever it was, I go and volunteer to do something for somebody else. And the Steve Jobs has his line perfectly, which is, you can connect the dots looking backwards, you cannot connect the dots looking forward. That is, when you get somewhere, you can look back and say, I did this, that's why I got here, right? But when you're there, you can't say, let me do this, let me do that, then I'm going to get there. It doesn't work like that. Nothing in life works like that, right? You can only look backwards and say, wow, that was a nice path. You can't look forward. That's opportunity. Most people don't take opportunities that are put in front of them, they just let it go. So, okay, that's it. So from my perspective, that's you solve the problem. So, but again, the goal is not to show you how to engineer success, but to show you that you can take a completely unmathematically formulated problem, like how do you engineer success, and think about it in a mathematical structured way. And the power of thinking in mathematical structured way is that you can solve complex problems without going nuts. If somebody just walks up and says, how do I become successful? If you don't give them an algorithm, you are just giving them advice. The difference between advice and algorithm is algorithm can be followed. Advice is like, you got to be really motivated to follow somebody else's advice, right? And 90% of the time, advice is bullshit anyway. So you should listen to advice, but you should let it pass through and filter out the interesting parts of it. So why does it work is important to understand. Because for me, it works because we address independent problems independently. You don't conflate things together. It's like when you're having a fight or a debate or an argument. When you have a fight on Twitter, I have a few once in a way. When you have a fight on Twitter, there is no concept of non-conflating stuff, right? People just absolutely, fighting on Twitter is the ultimate waste of time because nobody ever communicates in a useful way. It's always just talk about some other nonsense that you want to talk about. And the more you do that, the more that you can't make progress, because these conversations are not going to get you anywhere. So being able to separate a problem into independent parts that you can work on independently is the superpower that you get when you start thinking in the right way. Right? And of course, there are some things that you cannot solve. Like birthright, you can't solve. Well, what's the point of worrying about it? Don't worry about things you can't control. There are tons of things in your life, in my life, anybody's life, that you simply cannot control. Don't worry about it. It will happen. When it happens, you deal with it. Right? So the second part is, so you have independent things, then you got to go to first principles. Why? Why not? And then what? These are the fundamental questions that keep pushing you down to the bottom, the root of whatever is behind the problem that you're trying to solve. Right? If you don't get to the root, you're treating symptoms. It's like, when you go to a doctor, if they give you medicines for the symptoms you have and not for the cause of the symptoms, you don't get well. You might get well, and you'll get well because your body naturally fixes it anyway. Right? And that's why, a lot of people, I have an uncle who was a doctor a long time. I mean, he's older now. And the thing was, when somebody comes to see the doctor, at that time, this is 70s also, right? If the patient doesn't walk away with 3 things to take, patient doesn't feel good. Like, this guy didn't give me enough medicine. How am I going to get better? Right? So you give some yellow water, red water, and some pill. It's all placebos, but it doesn't matter, because your mind thinks that you're going to get better, and the doctor gave me all these 3 things, so I'm going to get better now. So you get better. Right? That's the reality. We all feel good when the doctor gives you a lot of medicine. I hate it, but generally people feel good, right? But so the point is, you got to think about the why question. Go to the root. Constantly go to the root. The more you go to the root, the more you can solve problems, right? And if you have come up with the basis for the problem space, you're done. You're done, like completely done. Again, you could be on the wrong basis. We've on SOAP, web services, access to basis for a very long time. That was the right basis for a while. After a while, that's not the right basis. And there's new basis coming, and another one will come in another 10 years and 5 years. We don't know. That's the way the world works, right? So you may not have an optimal solution, but you have a solution that does scale. That's the beauty of this approach. Right? So, last slide. So my belief is it is possible to solve a complex like Maria. And you solve it not by taking the whole problem at once, by putting on projections. The projection function, projection basically means cutting off, if you have a function with n variables, fixing n minus 1 and varying only 1, right? Then there's a very simple way of thinking about projection. Or in a 2-dimensional space, you bring it down to 1D, 3-dimensional, bring it down to 2D, then down to 1D. When you project down, you ignore the other stuff. So projection is like a filter for your mind. The more you are in this complicated, unknown n-dimensional space, you can't do anything. Because you don't know what the n is. You're all over the place. You're floating around in randomness. If you can project it down to something that you can tackle, you can solve the problem. Right? So to me, projection function is really a beautiful capability that helps you manage your mind. Right? And now, obviously, we are a software product company. Right? We make products, we market them, we sell them, we support them, blah, blah, blah. We need this way of thinking about problems for us to be successful. We have been successful. We have come to a certain stage. We will announce that on Friday at the awards night, what stage we've come to. We've come a long way from being a company of a few people here in Sri Lanka to being a global company. I think we have people in 18 countries. We have about 100 people flying in this week for various conversations. So we are a global business with customers in 93 countries. You're going to hear about some of that. I think Mefan is talking about the impact we've had. We've done all of these things. But to keep getting better and to keep constantly outthinking other people, you need to think in orthogonal terms. Every problem that you solve, whether you're an engineer, customer success person, marketing person, salesperson, you can think in clean terms that eliminates the complexity of the problem to a much simpler foundation once you start thinking like this. Any problem. And then life becomes easier. All right, thank you. I'm done with time. I saw this on Twitter today. Very nice quote. Thank you.